This episode is called SOS, Saving Ourselves from Suicide. Did you know that globally there's a suicide almost every 40 seconds? In the US, every 13.7 minutes, someone dies by suicide. It's the 10th leading cause of death for Americans and the second leading cause of death for Americans ages 10 through 34. Males die by suicide 4 times as often as women. In this episode of Minding Your Amygdala, we take a look at an important topic. Let's dive in. Hey creators, welcome to Minding Your Amygdala, the brain, body, and behavior podcast where you'll learn to awaken to your emotions, get informed about your biology, and motivated to use skills to improve your mental health. I'm your host, Dr. Alauna, America's one and only trauma psychiatrist. Do you recognize the critical importance of emotions and mental health? Do you want to know more about how to self-recover from trauma? Do you want to better understand the updated science about how our brain and body shapes our behaviors? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then you're in the right place. This podcast is focused on making complex brain science simple and usable. You'll learn the 6 primitive brain systems predictably programmed by trauma and empathy skills practice, my unique methodology that can help you improve your own thoughts, emotions, and actions. I'm the Skills Over Pills doc, but I'm also a mom of 3, a busy entrepreneur, and a human being trying to make it through multiple global pandemics just like you. Minding Your Amygdala will teach you transformative ways that you can approach your day-to-day life, and I'll give you strategies to break free from the trauma cycle. All right, let's get started. Hey, it's Dr. Alauna, and today's topic is one that is really near and dear to my heart. It is so important for us to have open and honest conversations about suicide and how it impacts communities and individuals at so many levels. So let's start by really looking at suicide from multiple angles. You have the individual who's experiencing suicidal thoughts or thoughts of wanting to end their own life, because I like to use the descriptive, objective, non-judgmental, and effective terms when I'm talking about these things. So now there is a bit of a difference between having passive thoughts of wanting to die or wishing that you were no longer alive versus what we would call active suicidal thoughts of wanting to do something specific to facilitate yourself dying. But we have the individual that's having the suicidal thoughts, but they are also existing within systems and communities and structures. So we have the partner or the spouse, the significant other, whatever that may be. You have parents who may be impacted by this, or children and extended family. You also have friends and friendships because, of course, we don't exist in a vacuum. So many times, the friends may be the ones who notice that someone is struggling. You have colleagues and work systems where many times we're taught just come in and focus on work and leave the emotions and that type of stuff at home. But of course, that is not consistent with how human beings are designed. We take ourselves everywhere we go. And then you also have the impact of suicidal thoughts on the mental health team. A lot of times people don't think of the treatment team as being impacted by the person's who's experiencing suicide. But, the treatment team consist of more than the psychiatrist, right? We often think about the medical doctor and the therapist that may be helping someone, but also, of course, there's part of maybe sometimes the social work team, or if they're hospitalized, there's mental health technicians and nurse practitioners and nurses and other people who are all centered around trying to keep someone safe from themselves. And, in the same way that we think about if a person is having a heart attack, that is a medical emergency, right? If they're having a stroke, where they're running to the hospital with ambulance lights, suicide is the mental health emergency, right? So when we think of it in that way, and if we treated it the way that it should be treated, I think that we would recognize that there's an impact on the community, even when someone individually is struggling with suicidal thoughts and feelings and behaviors. That also includes the first responders and the health, the emergency system that is around them, right? The EMTs who may have to respond, the police officers who may be goaded into suicide by cop situations and be traumatized in and of themselves by those experiences. So when we are thinking about suicide, it's a really important thing for us to understand as a society. It's not just, again, for them people over there, right? Because so many people experience suicidal thoughts on a regular basis. In fact, since this is really about dispelling stigma, we should take the time to recognize that suicidal thoughts are actually way more common than what you would imagine. I think one of the amazing things about being a psychiatrist is that people tell me things that they don't even tell their family. They don't tell their boss, their friends, they don't tell anyone else. And in my early career, actually felt shocked by how many people revealed that they had suicidal thoughts. However, that's not the same thing as many people having a suicide attempt. So just the presence of suicidal thoughts is actually relatively common, in part because death is so prevalent in our society. Okay. It's on our television. It's even in the cartoons that our kids watch. The characters die. And there's violence on our news channels where we're seeing these things. There is many people who have had to be exposed to war, and even within their neighborhoods are almost like war zones. And so when you have so much death around you in society, and then you are going through difficult, damaging psychological or emotional situations and circumstances, then to me, suicide became sort of a like, that kind of makes sense to feel that way. If when you're going through some of the things that people were going through and what their experiences were, I realized like, maybe it's not so strange. But also, it's really important to understand that suicide at its core is a response to psychological pain, invisible pain that you can't see. But I promise you, biologically, that brain is making it. It's there. So I always like to approach this topic from a space of not just being a trauma psychiatrist, but also recognizing that suicide impacts our lives sometimes in surprising ways. So my first brush with someone who was experiencing suicidal thoughts was when I was like 14, a freshman year of high school. And I was just minding my business, and I got a phone call, and it was one of my teammates, and she was in crisis. And whatever the circumstances were, I think she was watching her little brother, and I think he had broken something, and she knew that her parents were going to beat them. And she was very tired of whatever that was that was going on in her life. And so she was like, I'm going to kill him and I'm going to kill myself. And I was like, whoa, okay. Now I'm 14 at the time. And I'm like, So, of course, I didn't have any training on this, but I did follow my natural inclination to listen to her, to hear out what was going on with her, and to validate for her that the things that she was going through were painful and that I understood her frustration and that there was another way. There's other things that we could do. Please do not do this to your brother. And after probably about an hour or so on the phone, she agreed to not do that. And ultimately, we got in touch with some adults that were able to get to them and help get her into some treatment. And she did fine after that, thankfully. But I tell that story in order to really give context to the idea that most people's first contact when they are having suicidal thoughts, well, wait, let's back up. What I first mean to say is that people are not too young, ever too young to have suicidal thoughts. Unfortunately, in our society, there are many children who have experiences and who are in psychological pain because of their circumstances, who have thought about dying and thought about just wanting to check out from this thing. So we also need to break this idea that children don't have emotions and that their emotions are not real and that they're not big and difficult to manage. So secondly, most people don't see the psychiatrist first. Most people, when they're having suicidal thoughts, it's their friends, their family, the people that are around them, their teammates, their colleagues that notice those behaviors, notice the change in the way that they are. They may go from more talkative and engaged to quiet and disengaged. They may make comments that indicate that they no longer care, that they're giving their things away. They may make comments that say that they can't take it anymore or make sort of what might seem like threats at harming themselves. And by the way, self-harm and suicide are two different things. I would need a whole nother session to really talk about self-harm, but they often go in context together. And of course, in such a small amount of time, such a short amount of time, I cannot cover everything that I would like to cover when it comes to suicide. However, I do want to give a maybe different concept, different approach that we can take to conceptualize suicide from a brain, biology, and behavior standpoint so that anyone who meets this situation or circumstance can just have better tools and understanding with which to approach the person that they're trying to help. Or if it's you and you are the one who's had suicidal thoughts or is having them, understanding this biology and how your brain creates these internal, very powerful, invisible sensations and urges can be so helpful with choosing alternatives to self-harm and suicide. So let's go to this brain because your brain is your friend. And let's start with the amygdala because this podcast is called Minding Your Amygdala. So we need to understand how this amygdala is tied to suicide and suicidal thoughts. So the amygdala, once again, is a part of your brain that creates your emotions. It creates all of your emotions. It doesn't just do your fear responses or your fight, flight, freeze responses that you probably have learned of the amygdala as. The amygdala, of which you have two of them, are right and the left side. And that particular part of your brain, which is part of your limbic system, which is a even bigger system that regulates your emotions. Your amygdala creates the internal sensations that you call feelings/emotions. I think those are slightly different things, but most people use them as the same thing. Those are running in the background inside of your body at all times. And your brain creates those sensations, not based on any objective reality. It bases them on what you believe is happening in the moment and how you've been taught to interpret the circumstances. I have to regularly check myself on this because with my children, I can no longer say, "You making me mad." I have to remind myself that it's my interpretation of what they're doing that's making me mad. And that anger may be valid, but it's not them that's creating it. That is a biological impossibility. Your brain creates your emotions and then it transmits sensations into the rest of your body. It could be a flutter in your chest. It could be twisting in your stomach that you may interpret as your gut sensation or instinct. But those emotions are being created and transmitted through the rest of your body by your amygdala. The reason that that is important to understand is that when a person is experiencing suicidal crises, that amygdala is in a storm. The thoughts are big, the thoughts are extreme, the beliefs are big. And when we are having those internal extreme thoughts, it also results in extremes of emotions. And it can result in a person biologically experiencing such a roller coaster that they don't want to keep doing it. They're like, I don't know how to change this. If this is how I got to live, I can't imagine going longer in this body. that is how powerful those sensations can be inside of a person's body. The second brain system that you need to know as connected with suicide is your reticular activating system. Your RAS is your filter. Your RAS is the part of your brain that brings certain things into your conscious awareness and filters other things out. Your reticular activating system is designed to protect you, so it is constantly scanning your environment for things that you believe that you need to alert to. This is not just your ability to pick your name out of the PA system or the flight that you're on out of the PA system at the airport and scan all the rest of it out in the background. This is not just your ability to see all of a sudden when you decide that you want or like a certain car, all of a sudden it seems like that car is popping up all over the road and you're like, oh, yes, it's a sign, Lord, I'm supposed to get that car. No, that is your reticular activating system doing its job of now paying attention and alerting to the things that it thinks that you need to be aware of. Only the other side of that, though, is that your reticular activating system is programmed by psychological trauma. So a person's most painful experiences, most difficult circumstances that they've been through, they may not even recognize that they've experienced psychological trauma. However, their brain is programmed to highlight those things. And if they don't know that they have a brain that is filtering this information and highlighting certain things and drowning out others in the background, then what they're often going to be experiencing is a highlighting of negative experiences that begin to outweigh their positive experiences in an artificial way. So there's a skew that our brain puts on information because of this reticular activating system. And in real time, if you are listening, you can hear the person talking about their life and the things going on in a way that may overemphasize painful experiences and definitely underemphasize positive things that they may be able to use to manage that crisis that they haven't even thought of, because remember, they're trapped in that amygdala bubble and in that psychological emotional storm. The next system that's important is the somatosensory cortex. The somatosensory cortex is the part of the brain that registers pain. And it really doesn't distinguish between physical pain, like pain sensations that may happen in your body, a poke, a prick, a punch. It doesn't distinguish those from psychological pokes, prods, and picks. Okay, y'all know what I'm talking about, okay? If you grew up in a household where folks had jokes, or maybe not even jokes, but offensive words and statements and ways of interacting with each other, you experience this psychological pain of other people's words and actions and behaviors. And in fact, our somatosensory cortex, when it receives a signal that there is pain, it sets off a cascade of other things in your body that you then experience. Your muscles may feel more tight. You may experience what you think of as feeling more stressed or cloudy or tense or irritable. But those things are generated by these parts of our brain that are trying to let us know, like, hey, pay attention. There's some friction going on over here. There's some red stuff that we need to address. The somatosensory cortex is also really important to understand because you do not have to have interactions with other people in order to generate pain signals. For many people, the way that we think about things is creating the most amount of pain. Oh, ooh, shoot, let me say it again. Ooh, for many people, the way that we think about things, the conclusions that our brain draws based on our programming from our environment is creating psychological pain that we do not have to have, but that is very real indeed to our experiences. So when people are going through acute or chronic traumas, when I say acute, I mean, let me go back and redefine trauma again. Trauma being experiences that someone has that are negative internally. May not see it on the outside. They may not even realize that they're going through something. But experiences that are internally negative that change the way you think about yourself, other people, and the rest of the world. And that may be an acute trauma. It's something that is happening right now. Or for many people, there are chronic traumas, meaning that they have been exposed to or experienced painful experiences over and over again, often since childhood, that may not have ever been validated as traumatic. We're talking about racism. We're talking about gender-based traumas. We're talking about sexual-based traumas. We're talking about workplace traumas, racism traumas. Uh, Everybody went through COVID. We're talking about COVID traumas. So understanding that when we have these experiences, many of us change how we think. And it makes sense, right? We have to readjust in order to be able to move forward in a world that we have to take new things into account. So our programming updates. But if we're not conscious of how these thought processes affect us in real time in our bodies, then these things are running in the background anyway, and we don't realize it. Okay. So in that somatosensory cortex, when people are thinking negative thoughts, it's creating pain. They're slapping themselves psychologically. And I want you to know that there's so many people who say things to themselves that they would not say to other people that they love, or at least they say they would never say those type of things to other people that they love and care about. But because it's their own internal voice and the way they think, oh, you're so stupid. I can never, nothing is going to ever go right. You mess up everything. Everything goes wrong for me. Those are the type of thoughts that create very real pain inside of a person when they're in suicidal crisis. And those thoughts are reflected in their words. So as you listen to someone who is in that space, one thing that you can do is validate. And it's like, wait a minute, validate? What are you talking about, Doc? I don't want to validate them saying those things. Well, I'm not asking you to agree, but validation is a salve to the traumatized soul. So being able to say, you know what? I hear what you're saying. And I think that if I was in that space, I could understand how you're feeling that way. Just someone hearing validation and being able to say that under the circumstances, what they're feeling, what they're thinking, what they're experiencing, biologically, it makes sense, right? We can do that. We can validate that. And then we can show them another way. We can bring other concepts to the table. My goal, whenever I'm in a space where I'm, listen, I'm retired from clinical practice, by the way. I don't see any patients. But I tell you, at least about 4 or 5 times a year, I get a call. I'm like, hey, man, I haven't heard from this person in a long time. I answer it. Hey, how you doing? And they're suicidal. Job hazard of being Dr. Alauna, trauma psychiatrist. But what I do know is that this person has this primitive brain, these primitive brain systems that are going off right now, and have them in a space where they are revved up and where there's a lot of juices bubbling and flowing. And I've got to get to that prefrontal cortex. I've got to get to that most evolved part of their brain right behind their forehead, get them to calm down enough that we can begin thinking through strategies and thinking through what can we do to connect them to services and other support that they may not even realize that they had. And that is very rarely have we ever run into a circumstance where a person does not respond when they start recognizing, like, wait a minute, there's other things out there that I didn't know, and there's hope. Let me not forget about this fourth brain system that I wanted to talk to you about. The brain reward system is our dopamine system. It's our addiction system. It's driven by a very short-lived but powerful chemical called dopamine that all humans have. Even as babies, all the way through our life, dopamine is responsible for any and all of our addictive behaviors. So dopamine is a hell of a drug, okay? I know we talk about cocaine and heroin and opioids and marijuana and alcohol and even caffeine and nicotine. But we also have to recognize that dopamine is also a product that comes out when we eat salty, savory foods and sugar, when we have sex, when we're dealing with our significant other and they're giving us those butterflies, right? We are addicted to so many things. Our phones, our technology, our social media, our politics, all of those things that give us a dopamine burst result in repetitive human behaviors and habits. It's really a part of who we are. And one of our core addictions is that we love being right. Every human being operates in a bubble of delusion. Yes, I said it. I know y'all. Like, Doc, you keep calling me names. I came in here trying to learn, and you're telling me I'm delusional. Well, you are. Delusion defined as a fixed false belief that does not respond to evidence to the contrary. And because we have a profound lack of understanding of the advanced and amazing, amazing technology that the human body is, we have this huge blind spot for ourselves. And like even right now, I can see my hands, I can look down and see my legs and my feet, but my biggest blind spot based on the way humans are built is me, and yours is you. So one of the key things that our brain does is that it makes us right. Every human being operates with a bit of an addiction to being right and to thinking that our belief systems and the way that we have been taught to interpret reality is some core truth. And the reality is that every human being believes that their belief system and their reality is the reality. And of course, there's 8 billion of us almost on this planet. And that is just who's here right now. There's been many, many more, many others over the thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of years that human beings, this species, this one race has existed on this planet. Now, we're still catching up in a lot of ways about who we are and how we operate from a brain, body, and behavior standpoint. However, it's really important for us to start to use empathy skills in order to see the world outside of our own version of reality, in order to be able to pop the bubble and see how we can contribute in a healthier way to the interaction with other human beings. So I bring all of that around to say that when you are helping someone who is experiencing suicide, they are having a biological storm that is being set off inside of them. And guess what? You're going to be having one too. It's all part of how the human body and brain is designed. We're amazing. This I'm telling you, I can't wait to teach you more in the Trauma Cure on October 26th through 28th. The link is in the show notes, but we are going to have an amazing time. I only covered 4 of these brain systems today, but there are 6. Actually, there's 7 brain systems that you really need to know in order to understand that empathy is the cure for trauma. So, anyway, really bringing this back to a few points because we are in this space where there are so many people that we have no longer here by choice because they chose suicide. So, one thing that I would say to do is to honor those who have died. It's okay to recognize that there's complex grief when it comes to suicide because most of the time we like to think about humans live long, healthy lives and die when we're old. And then even I look at Queen Elizabeth and people are like, no, long live the Queen. It was too soon. I'm like, she was in her 90s, okay? Death is a part of life. And learning that no matter how a person transitions from this earth, we can memorialize them. We can give ourselves permission to have a good cry. You can do things like write a letter to them, look at pictures, make a small memorial to them or something in your home, take a moment or whatever it is that feels helpful to you to be able to grieve and feel all your feelings. You can be angry with the person and still love them, still grieve them, and be able to experience them in a healthy way. Create something from that painful experience. Number 2, we really need to remove the stigma of suicide. And we do that by talking about it. Changing the language that we use when it comes to the concept of suicide and what it means to want to end your own life is such an important step. We no longer say things like failed suicide attempt or a person committed suicide. We say die by suicide. And people are like, well, it's just words. It's nitpicky. No, it matters. I just finished explaining to you how much words matter. And even the words that you may use on yourself also create pain. So changing that language and being more descriptive, objective, non-judgmental, and effective in our wording can help save people's lives. The 4th thing that I want to remind you is to set healthy mental boundaries. It is so crucial to recognize that every person is ultimately autonomous and responsible for themselves and their own life. Even children, to a certain extent, are able to make their own choices. We can't control them every day, all day, even though we wish that we could sometimes. And then I think that's probably would be a bad idea. Even our children still get to choose their actions and their behaviors. And what we can do is influence others, but we don't own them. And even as adults, we are autonomous. I've had patients who threaten me like, doc, if you don't do this, that, and the other, I'm going to kill myself. And I'm like, well, that's your choice. I respect it. I would hope you choose different. However, I can't go home with you and make you go to your appointments or make you take your medication or make you not hurt yourself or make your car stay on the road or whatever other thing it is that you're thinking about doing. So I respect it. And if you do make that choice, I will pray with your family. I might come to your service, but I'm not going to accept responsibility for something that is not my responsibility. My responsibility is to do the best that I can for you in that moment, to provide you options and alternatives and information to the best of my ability with whatever time or energy or space that I have. And beyond that, the person is still responsible for making the choices to follow through. And whatever that is their choice. It's their life. And they can end it or continue it. And so I hope to provide them with just a small taste of there's so much more that we can learn. I can teach you these brain systems. I can give you these skills. There's so many more things in front of you that we can do. And most of the time, that person is going to choose the hope, choose the more. And so I hope that this has been helpful for you. You can learn more from me by coming to the Trauma Cure, and the link is in the show notes. It is thetraumacure.com, and I hope to see you there. I'll also put some resources in the notes for how to link to suicide stats, as well as fact sheets from the CDC and WHO that have some great information and helpful tips. And last but not least, don't forget that we now have the 988 number, which is the mental health crisis, national crisis line. Thank you so much for listening to Minding Your Amygdala, a brain, body, and behavior podcast. We'll see you on Thursdays. Take care.